Next topic is explain how transfer of learning and metacognitive process aid in learning. Transfer learning considered as the effect of prior learning, Mayer 2011. Transfer can be extended from the original context to the new one. However, some bits of knowledge are embedded in single context. Students fail to transfer what they know because sometimes they are confined to a single context in which knowledge is acquired. Lack of conditional knowledge. The word conditional means contingent, dependent, or provisional. For transfer to occur, students should know when and where to use their knowledge in a meaningful context. Inaccurate conceptions of the mind. This accounts for how students view their minds in relation to learning. Lack of metacognition. When students do not possess the ability to think how their thought process develop, or if they lack the ability to regulate and monitor their own thoughts, they cannot afford to develop transfer. Two types of transfer: positive transfer, negative transfer. Positive transfer, this occurs when students have the ability to harness strong association for some recall in the future. If they can use what they have learned in new situations, there is positive learning. For example, learning of mathematical principles enables the learner to acquire principles in physics. There are many illustrations of positive transfer in the school setting, which can be mentioned here. For example, learning grammar in any language and writing composition in the language. Negative transfer. This occurs when students find two events or items similar when in fact they are not. In other words, negative transfer happens when two materials are different. For example, if a learner is introduced to two new languages which are similar at the same time, negative transfer occur. Types of learning transfer according to Robert Gagne. Vertical transfer occurs when complex skills are more easily learned because of simple skills that are acquired. For example, when a pupil masters simple grammatical rules, he is enabled to speak correct English, write competently, and to study other subjects in English as well. Lateral transfer refers to students' ability to generalize knowledge or skill to a novel situation. There are 4 ways to promote transfer of learning: 1. Similarity, 2. Association, 3. Degree of original learning, and 4. Critical attributes. 1. Similarity. Transfer can be generated by the similarity of a given learning situation. If something is being learned, that learning can also be used in another similar situation. Association. Two feelings, events, or actions are held together if they have established their relationship or association. If they have created their special power to form associations, they can create a special bond that makes them inseparable. Third, degree of learning. It means that everything we do falls within the range or degree of performance. A certain activity may be categorized as easy, average, or difficult. The fourth one, and the last, critical attributes. Another way through which effective transfer may be promoted is through critical attributes. Attributes are qualities or things that are caused by certain circumstances.
What is metacognition? Metacognition, coined by John Flavel, refers to the learner's understanding and control of their cognitive processes. It is thinking about their own thinking. John Flavel, who is seen as a founding scholar of the field, said that metacognition is the knowledge you have of your own cognitive processes. It is your ability to control your thinking processes through various strategies, such as organizing, monitoring, and adapting. Additionally, it is your ability to reflect upon the tasks or processes you undertake. Metacognition has two main components: students' knowledge and knowledge of learning. It is the strategies to use in particular learning situations. It refers to what learners know about learning. An individual's knowledge of strategies, how to use strategies, and when and why to use strategies. Cognitive monitoring, which includes students' ability to select, use, and monitor learning strategies that complement their learning styles and the specific situation. It describes how learners monitor and control their cognitive processes. For example, a learner might realize that a particular strategy is not achieving the results they want, so they decide to try a different strategy. There are two types of metacognition: the explicit and implicit metacognitive knowledge. The explicit metacognitive knowledge. This refers to the conscious factual knowledge. It involves information about tasks. For instance, it is easy to remember the major point in the selection rather than to memorize the entire text. Implicit metacognitive knowledge. In this type of knowledge, children learn how to monitor themselves. Self-monitoring skills lie at their decisive power to choose what and how much to study. A perfect example is about a child who continually monitoring his or her own speech. When the child makes a mistake when speaking, they will stop and say the sentence over again, but correctly. Essential skills for metacognition: planning, monitoring, and evaluating. Planning. It is a form of decision making. Planning allows us to decide on various aspects: the time to be spent in accomplishing the task, steps to follow, or what to give priority to. Let's say you are writing your first book. It wouldn't be a smart move to simply get on with the first chapter. Instead, you should plan out and draft the outline of the book. Monitoring refers to one's special duty to be responsible. It entails a lot of checking, supervising, and seeing how the task progresses or develops. Given from the first example in writing your first book, after planning, of course, you also need to monitor your progress as you go. You can track it by writing down what progress you are making. For example, how many words you are writing each week. Evaluating is developing a sound judgment about the process and outcomes of thinking if we fail to meet the needed standards. Given from the first example again, you need to evaluate your work as well. You could do that by reviewing your week's work each weekend to be sure that you are happy with the quality of your work. In the end, you need to be able to reflect on these steps, as this will give you the ability to make adjustments to this process if needed. Here are the steps in metacognitive skills. First, diagnosis. Second, selection of appropriate strategies. Third, monitoring. And lastly, evaluation. Diagnosis. This means identifying the problem. When confronted with a problem, we estimate the level of its difficulty. Wherein the first thing that you will do is to examine and identify the problem, deciding what you need to learn, and then deciding how you are going to learn. That material will be your task. Selection of appropriate strategies comes next after we have diagnosed the material. To accomplish the task, we use a specific strategy. However, knowing what strategy to use is not enough. So, you will select a strategy that you will use in order to accomplish that certain goal. But remember, it wouldn't be enough. So, here comes the third thing that you will do. Monitor. This means keeping track of what we do and how well we are doing it. For example, if a certain strategy works best in a particular task, we tend to continue using it. Evaluation. This is the final step in the use of metacognitive skill. Evaluation means the act of examining or judging the worth of learning and the usability of the strategy. It involves reflection on how well you met your learning objectives after completing a unit of study or receiving feedback. Sample model for monitoring our thoughts. For metacognitive knowledge, understanding the block's cognition, understanding interference, knowledge about effective memory strategies, knowledge of recall, understanding meaningful material, knowledge of making meaning connection, knowledge of prior knowledge activation, knowledge of effective transfer. For metacognitive skills and strategies, using repetition to aid comprehension and memory, paraphrasing information that aids recall and comprehension, using rehearsals and praxis, using categorization and chunking strategies, using self-test, using organizational skills, using comparison and contrast model, using personalization, visualization, and algorithmic approaches to problem-solving activities. For monitoring self-awareness activities, varying study and learning strategies to meet task demands, dividing study time effectively, having a sense of metacognitive awareness, directing self to positive performance, predicting successful performance, recording progress, engaging in basic self evaluations, and using learning logs to monitor performance. Remember that metacognition has been linked to improved learning outcomes. It makes sense that individuals who are strategic in their learning are more successful than those who do not reflect on the learning process.
Good day to everyone. This is Judy Ann Rio Hilon, and I'm going to discuss the teacher strategies for facilitating the cognitive and metacognitive processes. First is rehearsal. Rehearsal is a cognitive process in which there is a conscious repetition of information over and over so that such information will dwell in the long term memory. It is a form of practicing to ensure that all details are adequately prepared and coordinated. Next is elaborative rehearsal. What is elaborative rehearsal? It is when we use information for deep processing and use its meaning to help us store and remember it. It involves using concepts that are already in your long term memory to remember concepts that are only in your short term memory. Elaborative rehearsal is a very effective way of encoding information into long term memory because it involves processing of information which increases the ability to recall information in a better way. So, there are suggested activities for rehearsal strategies. Here are the following. First, we have repetition and cumulative rehearsal. It refers to our ability to do or perform a series of motor movement or a list of words procedures. These are done from the simplest steps to the most complicated that build up mastery and efficiency. Repetition is the act of repeating, and cumulative is increasing in quantity. For example, when we're going to recite a poem, we read it repeatedly in order to memorize. First, we memorize the first stanza of the poem and add the next set and so on until we were able to memorize the whole poem. Another example is trying to learn the alphabet. When we were kids, we tried to listen and say it repeatedly until we were able to learn it. Questioning and answering are inseparable. Every question needs an answer, and also there are answers that have a follow-up questions. Predicting and clarifying. This accounts for our expectations of what will the teacher say or ask. We should anticipate what will transpire in the classroom interaction so that we can study in advance. Knowing or being able to be not confused or being able to have a strong belief on what will gonna happen will be a great strategy because you can be able to be prepared. Restarting and paraphrasing. It deals with our ability to put things in our own words and phrases, thereby connecting the information to our prior knowledge. It is restating someone else's idea in our own words. It's expressing someone else's ideas more clearly and more simply. These strategies help because it shows that we understand the topic well and enough to restate in our own words. Next is outlining and summarizing. These strategies help us create an overview of information as we reflect on its meaning. Outlining is often written in bullet points. It is the basic skeleton to which we will follow. It specifies which key ideas will be discussed and helps to construct and organize ideas in a sequential manner. And summarizing is always much shorter than the original text. It gives a concise overview of the main points of the topic. It simply gives clear and accurate information and ideas without missing any important details. Next is selecting. This helps us to decide on the things or ideas to be stored. Once we have chose those important ideas, we were going to focus on that ideas. Next is note taking. It allows us to write important ideas, definitions, proportions, or concepts. Doing such accounts for proper strategy selection. It is recording information by taking notes gained from different sources such as lecture or presentations. Also, note taking helps to remember information and support our understanding of that information. Underlining or highlighting. These strategies are effective enough when we mark important information in the text. It includes predicting and selecting. Underlining or highlighting is a strategy where only the keywords, phrases, and ideas that are central to understand the reading are being underlined or highlighted. This helps to be organized on what have been read by selecting what is important. Is clustering. When we cluster, we organize information to provide an ordering process that can include sequences, hierarchies, and categories. Clustering is grouping a set of objects in such a way that those objects in the same group or cluster are more similar to each other than to those in the other cluster. Lastly is elaboration. This occurs when we reach new information by adding extra information from our own schema. It is a process of linking information to remember information we already know. So there are two categories of elaboration, the verbal and image elaboration. Verbal elaboration is a questions that aim at drawing connection between the newly information learned and that which is already available in someone's knowledge, while visual elaboration is the create mental pictures or envision a place or event.